Hey, what's up everybody? Jason here. Thanks for checking out the channel today. So I'm going to show you how to build an interaction tracking tool for your Bubble app. So you can use products like Mixpanel and ClickUp and even Google Analytics to do this, but I really want to have this inside of Bubble so I can do some other fancy displays and share the data with users and user groups without having to use a third-party tool. Plus I'm cheap and I don't want to pay extra for those tools. This is pretty simple to build. So the first iteration I did for this was using Airtable, and let me just give you a quick demo about how that works. So these are my stats. I'm using the chart element inside of Airtable basically to display this. I can go into menu usage dashboard here, and this is going to show me what people are clicking on and all the different menus and things like that. And the data underneath is pretty simple. It's a simple interactions table that has the interaction type, which is the action that the user did, the subtype, which could be where they did the action from, either a widget or a certain piece of content, the email address if the person was logged into the site at the time, some notes, this is just random metadata to track things, and then also the page they did the interaction on, the Bubble user ID if it's found, and then just some other metadata here that makes it easier to generate reports. I'm also tracking the user role so I can see what logged in versus not logged in usage looks like. Okay, and here's the workflow that runs it. So I call a track interaction API workflow, and I'm capturing the user, the interaction type, subtype, note, and page, and these are all text. And then I'm sending that to an add user interaction workflow. So it sends that data to this add user interaction, and this is great because now I could either just send a new parameter to say use the new one, yes or no, and then I could create another record here to add this into Bubble, so I won't have to do a whole bunch of replacing on my site. And I'm going to migrate this over time as well, but at least it's centralized now. And the main problems that I'm going to solve is because these are text-based, sometimes I would type the thing in the wrong way. And the reason why I wanted to do that is because I didn't want to have to go into Airtable and create all the different interaction types and subtypes. I wanted to be able to create this on the fly and generate those reports. So that's going to change a little bit now as well. All right, so first a tiny little bit of planning. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to make an interactions, and I'm going to use option sets for this. Now the downside of using an option set is if I want to create a different interaction and subtype, then obviously I'm going to have to redeploy the site, but that's not a big deal. So the option set for interactions, that's basically going to be all my different types of actions. So that's going to be a page view, that's going to be a call to action, submit form, and those other types of things. And I'm going to need an interaction subtype. I'm going to call this interaction category, and this will essentially be the context that the user is doing. So for example, if the interaction is a call to action, which I'm just going to replace that with click. So the categories could be things like a hero. So if they are clicking a hero, if they are submitting an evaluation, for example. So I'm going to have a whole bunch of different types of categories, which will allow me to filter all those different things when it comes to creating my user interaction table. Let's use a different color here. So I'm going to have user interactions, and this is going to be everything that the user does. So obviously the created by is going to be the current user. I'm going to have the interaction. I'm going to have the interaction category. And I'm using interaction instead of events because I have events on my website and I don't want to just get confused by looking at that stuff. I'm going to also have a target element, and this is going to be text, and this is going to allow me to do things like on my main site, I have tabbed interfaces throughout the site. So I have a feature called the backpack, which basically allows people to clip stuff throughout the site. It shows a list of their events, the credentials they've earned. It's kind of their one place where it holds their stuff, like a backpack does. And I want to know what tabs they're clicking on and what they're doing. So the target element will be the tab's name. So I know they clicked something, they clicked a tab in the backpack, and it was the badges tab or something like that. So it's going to give me more filtering options. I'm also going to have a metadata, which is text, and this is just going to allow me to put in more contextual information for each of those records. I'm going to have the page URL, which is going to use the current URL or whatever the parameter is in Bubble, so I know what page they were on. That will allow me to do things like show me all the activity on this page, which would be views, clicks, calls to action, all that type of stuff. And then I'm going to store probably this separately, the anonymous user ID. And this will be the temp unique ID that Bubble assigns, so I know that that person was not logged into the site. So this should give me everything I need initially. The other things that are staying in the back of my mind is stuff that I want to do in the future. I want to be able to share the user interactions with trainers. So basically, if a user is interacting with something that a trainer has done, so maybe they created a featured banner, they have an event, they can go into their admin site, which they already have now, and then they can see some reports for that type of stuff. So it could be shared with trainers, or I have the concept of user groups as well. So for the user interactions in the future, I might have to add something like user group access and make that a list. I'm not exactly sure how to do that. And the other thing I might want to do in the future is also store a session ID, which is something that I'm going to have to generate. And the reason for doing that is because in the future I might want to do some funnel tracking. So for example, the user came in, they clicked the call to action from the hero for an event. They viewed the event details page, they clicked the reg button, and then they submitted the reg form. Now I would want to know that all those things happened in a particular session ID. So for right now, I'm going to track all these things, and they're going to be separate events, but it's probably good enough for now. But these are just the things that I'm thinking about. So let's get into creating the feature. Okay, so the option sets, I already created these off camera. So there's an interactions option set, and these again are the actions. And something I normally like to do is add a comment here. So this is a list of actions. And then sometimes I also link out to my Notion wiki. So if it's a complicated feature, at least my option sets or app data tables or my pages, they have links directly to Notion, so it will remind me basically some of the rules and stuff. So I've got click, page view, submit form, and search. Now I'm going to start with just replacing the clicks on my hero header. So if I go into my index page here right now, so what happens is in this hero, so this just picks a random set of featured hero data objects. So it grabs a random one that's showing as active, and then when the user clicks on them, then it will track that interaction. So it tracks it as a call to action. The sub action is its hero. It's going to know it's on the index page, and then the note is basically the title. So now I'll know what object that is. And this is one of the reasons why I'm switching this to Bubble, because now I can do some cool things on that featured hero data thing. I can store interactions directly on that as well. So for example, if a trainer creates a featured hero for a certain page, all the interactions will be tracked on that as well. And then I can just check to see if the created by is the current user, and then they'll be able to see that row or all those interactions as well. So that might be an easier security model. But again, I'm not too worried about implementing that yet. I just want to initially start to replace the tracking events into Bubble instead of using Airtable. So then the hero, it will basically click through to whatever URL that the user has set. And this is what they look like on the outside. So the hero banners, there's a title, there is a subtitle, an image, register buttons, URLs, and these primary button IDs is what I had been using for tracking, because there might be multiple hero sections there. I might want to have custom interaction tracking code for these. I'm probably going to decommission this after I build this feature as well. So the interaction, like I mentioned, these had historically been text and what page to show it on, but I'm going to be updating all that stuff as well. Okay, so I have a few interactions here, and if I wanted to, I could probably just add some extra metadata for this if I wanted to use anything else for these, but I think just a list of the actual actions is probably good enough. And then now my interactions category is going to be the context. So was it a call to action? Was it the navigation? Was it... So I'm going to have also on my interactions filter, which means I'm tracking what filters people are using on the site. So if they're filtering the events by location or by time zone, etc., that's an action they're doing. And then the category would be by time zone, for example, or by course type, those types of things. So those are all kind of sub-actions. So now I'm going to create the user interactions table. And I've already started doing this again, so I've got my interaction here. I'm not going to set a default value. Interaction category, I'm not going to set a default value either. Metadata is just going to be some random text. Page URL will be the page URL that it's on, and the target element will be some more contextual information and give me some more filtering options. So creator is going to be the user who did the interaction. The date is obviously going to be the date that they did it. I'm not going to put in a placeholder for the session ID, but I am going to store the anonymous bubble user ID. And I'm going to set that as text. I probably don't even need to do this one now because I'm not going to implement the sessions or stringing together tracking of things, but at least this would allow me to see what that single anonymous user did throughout the site. And then obviously that user ID is going to go away. So this might help me figure out what was the last page they looked at, when did they leave, etc. Now you might be thinking, yes, you can do all the stuff with Google Analytics. I find Google Analytics to be too confusing for events and stuff like that because I have a tiny brain. So I'm going to do it this way. Okay, so the first thing that I need to do is I need to go into my Airtable stats, and I'm going to make another API workflow. And I'm going to call this user interaction tracker. This is not going to be a public workflow. It will not run without authentication, and I do not want to ignore the privacy rules. So I'm going to do a manual definition, and what I'm going to need to be sent is the interaction. I'm going to be needing the interaction category. Category, easy for me to say. Interaction category. The user who did it. I don't have to pass the user in. I could just kind of hard code it into the this workflow event here. But basically, I'm going to pass current user, and then in the workflow here, when I'm tracking anonymous versus logged in, I'm just going to go current user is logged out, then store their temporary ID in that anonymous field. Otherwise, just store the user. And the created by is going to track that user anyway. So I'm just going to put that logic inside the workflow here. And then I'm going to also need the metadata, which is going to be text. I'm going to make that one optional. And then the target element is also going to be text, and I'm going to make that optional as well. And I think that's everything. Page URL. So I'm going to have to put in the page URL as well. Page URL. That's not going to be optional. Now, this has the potential to get very messy with a lot of data as I go through testing. So what I did in Airtable was basically just exclude a list where version-test is in the URL, and then my email address is in there as well. So it automatically filters out my data. I'm not going to worry about that yet, but I'll do that probably in a future update. Okay, so I'm going to create a new thing. That thing I'm going to create is going to be user interactions. Let's set all fields. So this is an interesting trick here I'm doing. So basically I'm going to set the anonymous bubble user ID it's going to be current user is logged in. So this will evaluate to true or false. So if the current user is logged in, if it's true, so the formatting for yes, don't store anything. Now I could store that person's bubble ID in there as well, but when I do my queries, I'm going to do queries based on where that field is not empty. So which is good enough for now. Now, with the amount of data, obviously this is going to depend on how big your site is. I probably get a couple of thousand interactions a week. So that's based on stuff that I'm tracking. I probably get, I don't know, a few hundred unique views every day. So it's a pretty small site as well. But, you know, I can prune the data. I can make summary tables with the data for reports and stuff like that. But I'm not too worried about having too much data to deal with here. So the current user ID, if the formatting for no is going to be the current user unique ID. And that's going to be the temporary ID that bubble assigns. So basically, if the user is logged in, it's going to put nothing there. If they are not logged in, it's going to stuff that temporary unique ID in there. So the interaction is going to be whatever the interaction was. The category is going to be what the category was. Metadata is going to be the metadata, page URL, and the target element. Oops. Target element. So that's going to create the interaction instance. Okay, so next I'll implement this on my index page just to test this out. So let's just take a look at what this page looks like right now. All right, so I'm a logged in user, obviously, and then there's a couple of buttons here, a couple of action buttons that people can do. So let's put those in. So right now what's happening is this is going to the old API workflow that I created, and then it is redirecting the user to whatever the URL for that site is. For that feature is. So I'm going to schedule a new API workflow. It's going to be user interaction tracker. The interaction is going to be click. The category is going to be a call to action. The user will be current user. The metadata will be, I'm going to say this is going to be hero banner. And then the name or the title of the banner for now. Target element is hero. Now this is why I'm using text for this, because now I could do reports to say, show me all the calls to action on the page URL homepage, and then I could have a report to say, okay, well, 4 people clicked the hero thing, 7 people clicked the training list, etc. So I can slice and dice these however I want. And then this is really the only thing to have to really worry about. So it might be useful to have a list of text-based things that you're going to pass to this. Now, and the scheduled date is going to be current date time. And this is going to simply track the interactions. Now, to make it a little more complicated, here's the things to think about when implementing this. So now the user, there might be an image for one of these featured banners as well. So the user can click on the featured image, they can click on a primary button or a secondary button. So it depends on how much you want to actually track. So I am also using a product called Microsoft Clarity, which actually is pretty good. So it gives you heat maps and it shows what people are clicking on. So you can always go there and just eyeball your index page or whichever page it is, and it's going to give you click counts on all of that type of stuff. But because I want to share this with users, then it's I have to build it this way for now. So to think about this, the target element, right now I've got hero. And what I might want to do is, because I'm doing this workflow on the primary button here, I'm going to set this to hero primary button. Then I'm going to copy this workflow, and I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to replace this, the existing track workflow, I'm going to make this secondary button. So it's going to show me the user did a click, it was a call to action, the user's current user, it's from this banner, and they clicked on the secondary button on this URL. So let me get rid of that action, and then let me go back to the primary button and get rid of that action, the old one as well. And then now I'm going to put in the featured image. So this is a workflow just on the actual image. If the user hasn't uploaded an image to the featured banner, then obviously it just doesn't display. So I'm going to delete that, and hero, this is going to be on the image. So now let me go and check. So I'm going to click on the primary button there, and let me go into the user interactions data. And there you go. So it was a click, it was a call to action, clicked on this banner, that was the URL, and it was the hero button, the primary hero button that the person clicked on. So now if they clicked on the secondary button, then obviously it's going to say they clicked on the secondary button for this. Now I could get really nuts and I could store more metadata in here. I could store what URL they were going to, or the name of the button that they were clicking on, depending on what it is that I want to track. And then now I can just simply go and create some reports for this. Now I'm just going to make a new page really quickly. Let's just call it Skunkworks to show you what I plan to do when I build all the reporting features out. Okay, so I'm going to have a repeating group. Let's make this a column. I'm going to use tables for this, but this is a trick that I like to use sometimes with using tables, because you can't filter tables in Bubble, but you can filter repeating groups. So I'm going to have a 1-by-1 repeating group here, which is just going to grab me all of the user interactions. So let me just do a search by user interactions. I'm going to sort by created date, descending. It's going to be all the rows, and then I'm just going to put a table below that. Call this user interactions, and I'm going to set the data to be the repeating group list of user interactions. So this way I don't have to worry about setting data in tables and all that kind of stuff. It's just going to do this automatically. So I want this to be the call to action, or sorry, I want this to be the interaction. I want this to be the interaction category, and then just for simplicity's sake, let's just say the user. So the interaction is going to be the interactions display. This is going to be the interaction category display, and this is going to be the creator, let's just say first name. And I'm going to put defaulting to anonymous. So this defaulting to, I did a video on this. This is a very useful feature. So if this value is empty, you can set it to default value, and then you never have to worry about data on your site just showing like an empty row or something like that. So let's just set this to flat color. And now I want all the rows to show up, and let's preview this. So there's the records that I did, obviously. And then now it would be very simple for me to add some filtering options here. So I can call this group filters. And I already have a reporting page, so I'm going to build just a very, very simple version of that here. So what I want this choices to be, I want it to be the user interactions, and I want the sources to be the, for this one, I want it to be the user interactions, and I want to group these by the page URL. So this is just going to show a list of page URLs. There. So that's the one page URL where that interaction happened. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do an anonymous session here. And I want this to be on, let's just do the root folder here without the debug information in there. So this is going to track an anonymous click to one of those buttons, just so you can see what the data looks like. So I'm obviously not logged in. I'm going to click on the Explore button. So that is there. And then now I've got, it was a click, it was anonymous. Now you'll notice there's going to be 2 pages in here because obviously I don't have the debug equals true. So now I can go completely crazy with the filtering options and the report options, and basically over time migrate the old thing from Airtable into Bubble. And again, the main reasons for doing this is there's no integration to maintain. I can share the data with my existing users and my existing user groups, and I don't have to pay for another tool to do it. So hope you enjoyed this video. Hit like and subscribe, and drop a comment below if you've got questions for how to implement this. Thanks for checking out the channel.